I think the most important thing to do is to engage with people and use your imagination. And this is what we said at the beginning, and just think about tomorrow and plan for tomorrow.
Welcome to I Share Hope, the podcast where world leaders share their real stories of hope and how you can use actionable hope to start changing your life today. And now, here's your host, Chris Williams.
Hello?
Hello, I am terribly sorry about that.
There's no problem, but I do have to go by 1:30. I've got another call then. Yeah?
Let's go ahead and knock this out. I think we can do this in 20 minutes without any problem at all. Is that good to you?
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you for your time.
Pleasure.
So, will you say your name exactly the way it's pronounced so that I don't get it wrong?
It's Susan Greenfield.
That's exactly what I thought. Just making sure. All right. Well, Susan Greenfield, thank you for giving us hope today. You're sharing with an audience that's in over 40 countries, and we're getting downloaded in places I never dreamed of, and the interviews are being transcribed and read all around the world. So thank you for your time. Tell us.
Well, it's a very good project, a very important project.
I appreciate your willingness to do this, because I think it is too. So tell us about you. I want you to kind of give us a background, just real briefly. What are you doing in the world right now? Because you have so much going on.
Well, really, it's a common theme that perhaps has different ways of expressing itself. But basically, I'm a scientist, and I'm interested in the human brain and what makes one individual different from another. And so I suppose the different aspects of that would be writing books, giving talks, but above all, doing research into Alzheimer's disease. That's my main area.
And is it true that you have over 30 doctorates?
32 honorary degrees, yes.
That's incredible, 32 honorary degrees.
You know, they all come along at once, but it's not as if I've done 32 theses. It's a mark of recognition from a university. So yes, I'm very proud of that.
I hear the honorary ones are harder to get than the earned ones. So
Sure.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, let me ask you these 5 questions about hope that we ask 1,000 leaders in the world in different fields. So question 1, what is your definition of hope?
It is...
or your favorite quote about hope, either way.
Okay, it will be thinking about tomorrow. It will be focusing on tomorrow rather than the immediate situation.
Okay, that makes sense. It really does. Getting out of today's, craziness.
It's escaping from today. That's assuming, of course, something horrible is happening or something that could be better by focusing on what tomorrow could be like.
Sure. Excellent. Fantastic. Okay, number 2. Who's shared that kind of hope with you? Who's been a leader in your life who's given you the foresight to look ahead?
Well, there's someone who I never met, but who has acted as a role model very much for me. And that's someone called Rita Levi-Montalcini. And she was born at the beginning of the 20th century in Italy. She was Jewish. And that was not a good time to be Jewish in a fascist country. And so what happened was, under Mussolini, she was a doctor, but she was forbidden because she was Jewish from practicing medicine. So what she did, she set up a laboratory in her own house. And the basis of the work she did there eventually won her the Nobel Prize. So
really? I would love to read more.
It's an amazing one. And she lived to be 103. She was in the upper house of the Italian government. She looked really beautiful. She was really elegant with hair up and so on. So she, for me, is someone, and she had this lovely quote. She says, above all, do not fear difficult moments, for the best comes from them.
Wow.
So I think she is a huge role model. On a more sort of modest scale, people I've actually met, I think someone to find a mentor or someone who believes in you more than you believe in yourself. And I've had several mentors. One was one of my teachers at school who taught Greek, ancient Greek. And she was very inspirational. And that's why I initially did classics, Latin and Greek at school. Another, when I went to Oxford, was my tutor, who said it'd be a laugh if I was a scientist, because I wasn't a scientist. And then more recently, there's a very dear friend, a guy called John Stein, who is always the person I phone up first when we get data to discuss and so on. And I can't imagine not having him in my life as someone who's just there. And so I think those 3, Veronica Lem and Jane Mellenby, their names, and then John Stein, have been very, very important to me.
Perfect.
Oh, and then my mum, of course.
Oh, yeah. That's
my
great.
My mum, she's 88 and just written a book.
Oh, wow.
Yes, she goes dancing still and wears sparkly clothes. So she's great.
All right, so what's the title? What's the title of her book?
A long time.
What's her book title?
It's called Wartime, Peacetime, My Time. And it's the story of how she was coming from a very modest working class background, but went to a very grand girls' school She got a scholarship there in the 1930s. In fact, the same school I eventually went to. And then because I was very snobby, she ran away and went on the stage because she loved dancing. And then she danced during the war, entertained all the troops. Then met my father, who was Jewish, and that was a mixed marriage, which was considered very controversial in those days. So it's really about the tectonic plate clashes between religion and class, which in England is a very serious issue still. And it's how she dealt with that and how she became an individual in that, So
Beautiful.
Yeah, and the fact she's 88 and has mastered word processing and still goes line dancing every week,
That's great. All right, question 3. What's a time in your life? Take us back to a place that's real for you, where you had to force yourself to use that hope of looking forward into the future, not just focusing on the trouble of today.
Yeah, I think, funnily enough, it may have been when I worked in New York, because this was in the early 1980s, before one was easily connected in the digital world as one is now, and I was completely alone. And I'm sure you've been to New York and you'll know
Absolutely.
that for a foreigner, it's very daunting and baffling and confusing. And I was there, and I remember sometimes on a Friday night saying goodbye to the people I was working with, knowing I wouldn't talk to anyone else until Monday morning. So it was a very lonely time. And I say in those days there was no emails and no Skypes and no texting, and phone calls were very, very expensive. You only kept them for emergencies. So it was a very lonely time. And I think the only thing that kept me going was that the work. It was important I was there for the work, the research. But that was a hard thing to live through for several months.
Yeah, that is. Loneliness is, and not knowing how to connect.
I'm quite gregarious, and I'm used to lots of friends. I suddenly felt very, adrift.
It's crazy how lonely you can feel in a city like New York,
Yeah.
Okay. And then how are you sharing hope today? So question 4 is, what are you doing right now? Obviously your research and all of the things you're doing, particularly for Alzheimer's patients, but on a daily basis, most of us aren't superhumans, and our IQ is not through the roof like yours is. How do you share hope to people around you on a daily basis?
For example, I have a very close and dear neighbor whose husband's just died. And one of the things I was just take her out for dinner. He died on the Friday, and I took her out for dinner on the Sunday, and because her family had been there immediately, and then they left. So it's just seeing the gaps for little things like that, where when people are particularly vulnerable, you just come in and do something quite simple. It's not some grand gestures, and you can't change their lives. You certainly can't make the grief go away, but you can let them know you're there, and that there is a tomorrow. That you can say, well, this is a whole new phase of your life, and so in that sense, I'd like to think with my friends, my close friends, one does that. I think just being there, texting them or phoning or going out for dinner is perhaps the best you can do.
That's wonderful. All right, now get in a little deeper with your superhuman work that you're doing with all your research and your brain power. What are you doing? Explain how you're bringing hope to people, because I've had one person in my family who had Alzheimer's, and it was really hard. It's probably, of all the things out there you can get, it's the one thing I think about the most, that I don't want to get that.
Yeah, it's because whereas other diseases such as cancer or heart disease are unpleasant, life-threatening, distressing conditions, you're still the person that you ever were. So you can still recognize your partner, you can still recognize your grandchildren, however much you may be suffering, you're still you still have your memories at least. Whereas that's taken away from you with Alzheimer's. And that's why it's so cruel, because the carer will often feel the stages of bereavement that normally you'd see when someone's died, but the person, of course, is still breathing. And society doesn't realize that. Often people don't realize that they're going through a severe sense of loss. That they would have had if the person had been in a road traffic accident or something, but they're there, but they're not there. And that's why, it erodes the very thing we prize most, which is our minds, which is what makes you the unique person you are. So I think there's two ways in which my work, I hope, brings hope. And I do say this because I'm a patron of a particular Alzheimer charity and so on. You say, look, we're not giving up. We're trying, because it's a disease. It's not a natural consequence of aging. It is a disease of older people, and that's not the same thing. And if it's a disease, there must be a cause. And if there's a cause, we need to find out what that cause is, because once we know what the cause is, given the ingenuity of the biomedical industry, we can intercept it. Yeah. So that's what I say, is the hope is that it is a disease. It is not a natural thing. It doesn't normally happen. Yeah. So we need to find out what it is. Now, of course, that's the tall order. That's what we're trying to do. And obviously, I'm biased about our own research, but I think we're onto a promising lead, but it's still a long way off. If anyone's interested in our particular approach, it's neurobio.com, neuro-bio. Look at our website. Just Google neurobio.
And we'll post that on our social media and our website as well, because I think people would be very interested.
And the other hope that I feel more generally, what I think and talk about, I hope, is that the impact of technology, which many people are concerned about, saying, look, can't we harness this? Because we've got the best ever chance of living to be 100. We're living in a world that's never been materially as comfortable, at least in our privileged societies. Obviously, in Syria, people won't say the same thing. But so we should be making the most of this. We should be talking about, if you're going to live, what are you going to do with the second 50 years of your life? And I try and do that with people saying, look, you must start thinking and planning and deciding what you want, because then the technology will deliver that, but it won't deliver it if you don't specify what you want. So I try and give people hope in the sense of empowerment, rather than just feeling that they are just on a roller coaster with computers and they can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I love that. So question 5 then is, how can a regular person like me start sharing hope or growing in hope myself today? So we hang up the phone call here, and what do I do next?
Okay, well, obviously engaging with others, whether it's through your channels here or whether it's face-to-face. But the most exciting thing to say to people is imagine a world where we could do this or that. And if you think of Martin Luther King's great speech, it was, I have a dream. Yeah. And as someone said, the difference between a leader and a manager is a manager will tell you what to do and do the right things, but a good leader, a true leader, will say, look, if only we could do this or that. Imagine. And I think saying to people, imagine, is the way, because then you are imagining tomorrow, You are imagining something that's different from where you are currently, assuming that where you are currently could be improved upon. Yeah? So I think the most important thing to do is to engage with people and use your imagination. And this is what we said at the beginning, and just think about tomorrow and plan for tomorrow.
Wow, I love that. It takes a lot of guts to imagine like that too, because you don't want to get, as adults, we've been disappointed a few times and we're scared to do that.
I think also one of the biggest things that hold people back and that we owe our children to give them is a sense of confidence and strength, where everyone's going to have problems. We're all going to have medical, financial, professional, and personal problems in our lives. Point to one person who hasn't had any of those kind of things. The best you can do is to help people be strong enough and resilient enough and confident enough that they can take that on the chin and they can cope with it, rather than falling victim to it. And I think that it's not so much you say to someone, oh, you're going to have a wonderful life where you're not going to have any difficulties. There's no point in doing things that aren't easy, and you're going to have difficulties. But what we should be doing to people and helping them with is giving them the strength, the inner reserves to cope with that.
Yeah. Brilliant. Wonderful. Okay. 2 final questions that we have just a very few minutes left, and these are quick questions. Number 1, what's the question that you wish people would ask you that they just never ask you?
What is the meaning of life?
And I'm ready for the answer.
Well, it's not 42.
That's the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah. And what was the other question?
The other question is, what would you ask the next person I interview for I Share Hope? Forget about what they do or where they come from, but what would you ask them?
Okay. So that's a difficult one, because
it is. Yeah.
So you want something that others can identify with. Okay, I would ask them to name the time in their lives, or to describe the time in their life when hope saved them, when having hope, when against all the odds, actually having a hope made it better, actually got them out of a horrible situation. Because one can imagine scenarios where people are in real despair, and then something happened, or they suddenly thought something that alleviated that despair. Yes, I'd ask them that. When in their lives was having hope the most helpful to them?
I will. The next guest we have is an Olympian, and I'll ask them the question. Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, Chris. And keep up the good work.
You're fantastic. Thank you. This is, again, we have Susan Greenfield on here. I think I could say doctor 32 or 33 times and then put Susan Greenfield after it and I'd be more accurate. So thanks for your time.
So every day of the month, yeah. So, okay.
Doctor, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
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 You've just listened to I Share Hope. If you're ready to make a change, head to our website at isharehope.com and claim your free copy of the top 10 actions of hope from world leaders to use hope in your own life. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.